Hello, hello everyone. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. This is Mentor Ana once again and we are live. So it's April 7, it's past 10 o'clock in the evening. Kamusta po ang inyong Tuesday? How is your Tuesday doing so far? I hope that you are all doing okay. And as for me, this is another busy day for me. I'm working on something on the side, no, yung aking mga errands, yung aking mga small projects. And I decided to do a quick go live with you to talk about another important topic. But before we jump right in, ako po si Ana Montesa. I'm a former accounting and finance professional, dating hospital CFO na nagtrabaho sa corporate world for 15 years, turned digital business mentor and owner for 5 years. So we are actually live on my Facebook page, on my LinkedIn account, and also on my YouTube channel. So if this is your first time to be here, please feel free to drop in wherever you are watching from. I'd love to know kung saan ka man nanonood right now. So for tonight, I just wanted to talk about something very real. And this is something that I personally experienced just earlier this evening. No, and some of the things that I've also, yung mga inquiries that I got no, from a lot of people about the business, because sometimes what we think we need is not actually what we need. Right? So we say, kailangan natin ng maraming clarity, gusto natin mas malinaw, we want to have more information, we ask a lot of questions, we need more time to think about the business. But here is actually the bold truth. Sometimes it's really not the information that we are lacking. Sometimes it's really the decision that we are actually delaying, right? When we keep on asking a lot of questions, well, in fact, we are just, trying to find a way to delay the decision that we need to make, right? So earlier today, I had a conversation with someone who was genuinely interested about the business. So they were asking good questions. They were really interested to know about the business. They were asking thoughtful questions, and as my role here is to answer them as clearly as possible as I could. But then I noticed something about these people. No, even after getting a lot of answers from my end, they kept asking for more information. So instead of giving them the clarity, they keep on, asking the next question after next, after next, after next, and they never stop. They were really asking for more details about the business. They want to have more reassurance about their decisions, maybe. And that actually made me pause. Not because that their questions were really wrong, but because that I've seen this, pattern many times from those people who have seen this business, they have, expressed their interest about the business, and then, this pattern keeps on happening over and over and over again. And this is what often happens, no? We usually say that kailangan ko lang ng mas maraming clarity. But even after we receive clarity, when someone answers your questions, we still feel unsure about our decision. So what happens is we keep on asking again another question, right? So hanggang sa, the person also try naman their best to also answer your question, and then again and again. And then at some point, it's, you might think that it's really no longer about the information that you're really asking. It's really about hesitation. That's why you keep on asking those questions, right? At hindi ka pa rin nagde-decide to move forward. Now, I remember, when I was still in that same position, just like you, maybe this is also you. You've already expressed your interest about the business, and then you keep on asking questions, you keep on delaying, instead of moving to the next step. I was also that same person, no? When I first encountered this business, I already had the access to information. Yes, I could ask questions. I know that. So the person was really patiently asking me the right, or giving me the right answers that time. And then, I could ask questions. I could observe ano ba yung ginagawa niya in their business page, right? I could learn kung anong ginagawa niya in the business. But there really came a point when I also had to be honest with myself. na after, giving me the answers that I got about the business, I already understood enough to really take the next step, right? So what I was really doing that time, instead of moving forward, was I was actually delaying a decision. And when I finally decided to move forward, right, and pay the $149, which is refundable, I moved forward not really blindly, but based on what I knew, right? And that's when the things became clearer. So yung hinahanap ko na clarity, really, yun din yung nakuha ko when I move forward and pay the refundable $149, right? So for those who are still in that point, right, you are still, giving yourself some time, you are still hesitating, despite giving, despite receiving the answers to your questions, and like you are still being held back, right? So I just wanted to share with you some of the things that I've also learned along the way, right? So the first is, number one, information has a limit, right? So more information, right, doesn't always lead to clarity. Sometimes what happens is the more that you get more information, that's actually where you get the delay. Because what happens is you keep on asking and asking and asking. And what happens is now you are overthinking. You try to assume things about the business. Well, in fact, hindi naman yun talaga yung the actual reality, right? Now, some of the actions that you can take here is, try to ask yourself honestly, do I really need more information, or am I just avoiding a decision? And I know and I really understand, no, that the 149 US dollars is not really a small money. And I get that. I really understand that because, I was also just like you when I was also saving that money that's part of my savings to really explore about the business. But one thing that made me, push forward was I knew that the 149 US dollars was refundable anyway. And I trusted the person who shared the business to me, who is also a Filipino couple, who is also an accountant, a licensed accountant, also like me. And then I realized that I also have to make a decision, right, to check the business out because back then that was the reason that I was searching for a plan B, and then I saw the business, right? Now the second is clarity deepens through experience. When you keep on watching, when you keep on listening, that can actually only take you so far. But actually, what happens is, yung totoong understanding really happens when you engage, right? So, for example, if you are still in that decision making process and you have been holding yourself back, so some of the actions that you can take to move forward is, instead of really staying in observer mode, right? I know that yun din ang ginawa ko nung when I saw the business. I was also observing ano ba yung ginagawa ng taong nag-start din ng business na ito. Okay, so instead of staying in the observer mode, just try to do one small step, right? So, for example, if you are still in the first few phases in your exploratory process, no, like watch the info webinar, and then after watching, you ask questions. Now the person can answer your questions, but you also start to explore the next process, right? You try to also engage with intention, and instead of getting and getting and getting, is you also try to kumbaga, engage yourself, right? If you really want to start a business, then you have to move on to the next step, explore the process. And sabi ko nga, this is still refundable, so wala namang risk dito, wala ring mawawala sa'yo, because if you find it's not a perfect fit for you, you can always ask for a refund, right? Now the third is, readiness is not a feeling. It's actually a choice, right? So most people don't feel ready. And what happens is they really decide first, and then they grow into that decision. Because a lot of people, they're saying na hindi pa ako handa. hindi pa ito yung right time, hindi pa ito yung priority ko, no? And some of the action that you can do to really address this one is you try to decide on one thing this week, right? So maybe jumping too far is really difficult for you. You try to ask yourself, ano ba yung willing kong gawin or going kong explore seriously, right? Hindi lang casually. So for example, you are really serious about earning extra income online, right? And you know that you are in need of extra income and then you saw the business, right? So instead of you just asking casually, kumbaga, keep on asking questions, right? Why don't you start taking the process seriously, right? And then kung ayaw mo pa mag-jump to the honey, maybe you just need some clarity. Ask the person who introduced the business to you so that you can also get the clarity, right? And even if that person answers your questions, right? And that person is telling you to move on to the next step, then maybe that's your next step as well, right? Because what if that next step can actually, unlock new possibilities for you that you haven't imagined, no? Or maybe ito yung the answer to your prayer, just like it was for me when I saw the business, right? And just to be clear with you guys, and for those who are watching this live or will catch us on a replay, so the info webinar is really designed to give you a general overview of how the business really works, right? So when we say general, kumbaga, it's a high level, yung terminology natin, diba? It's a high level overview of how the business really works now. It's really not meant to really answer every single detail that you have been, meaning to ask. Maybe you have listed them down, may mga questions ka, right? So you list them down, right? But that info webinar is really meant to help you understand and enough for you to decide and ask yourself the question, like, do I really want to explore this further or not, right? That's actually the purpose of the info webinar, to get to give you that bigger picture first, right? So dito kasi sa business, we don't really pressure anyone. We don't chase people to start, hey, you start a business, no? We really give you what you call this, the choice, right? Because we are all adults here. We are giving you the choice to make that decision based on the information that we give you, right? So after watching the info webinar, that's actually the time that you ask yourself, do I really want to explore this business further or not? Right? Because deeper clarity doesn't really come from just watching, right? It really comes from stepping in and start learning about the process itself. And this is also something that really is very important for us to really understand. Dito kasi sa business, this is really not about guessing ano yung gagawin mo. The business really follows a structure. So there's really a procedure here. So hindi ka pwedeng mag-jump ng step 1, jump ka kagad sa step 10, right? So dito meron talagang proseso, right? If you are that type of person na gusto mo merong order, merong proseso, merong procedure, right? Then maybe this business is a perfect fit for you, right? Dito sa business, meron din tayong clear steps sa sinusundan. And part of succeeding here sa negosyong ito is being willing to learn and follow that process even while you are still exploring the business, right? Again, not because that you are limited, no, but because the process will give you the right direction, right? So just like when we first started, lahat kami, yung over 280,000 or almost 280,000 ng mga business owners in the community, we also went through the same process, right? And it really also removes yung confusion, right? Because for those people who are really wanting the shortcut, they want to get the information quickly. I want to know bakit kailangan ko pang manood and so on and so forth. Because that process is very important in order for you, right, not to rush you to make a decision based on, let's say, on the price of the business or the investment of the business or kung ano man yung gagawin. Because in order for you to make that informed decision, we also want you to see the complete picture, right? Because if you see the value that the business can also give you in return, then that's the time that you can also make the right decision, right? So again, what happens also kapag you follow that process, it also reduces the trial and error. And again, it really helps you to move forward with clarity, even if you are just starting to explore the business, right? So again, let me ask you, so are you still, gathering information, right? For those people who've already watched the webinar, maybe hindi mo pa napapanood, right? Or maybe napanood mo na. Maybe you've already asked questions about the business. You've already asked me questions. I've also answered your questions. Are you still in the process of gathering more information, right? Or are you really ready to take your next step? Because at some point, movement really matters more than more knowledge, right? Because ayaw natin nag-overthink tayo. And what happens is when we keep on overthinking, that's actually where we get to delay the action or the decision that we need to make in order for us to move forward, right? And that's exactly what I did when I started to explore this digital business. I asked questions. Yes, I did that. But instead, of asking so many questions, I listened and trusted the Filipino couple who introduced this business to me, right? And, I followed the process. I didn't wait until I knew everything, right? For me, I really understood enough to really take the next step. And that was to really to pay the refundable 149 US dollars. And when I did that, that's actually where I get the clarity that I need. That's when the real clarity started to come because everything, the complete business details was already there. Lahat ng information that I need, lalo na kung accountant ka, right? You need to have a complete information. Or maybe you're also in finance, you need to also have that complete information in order for you to assess if the business is really worth checking out or not, right? And again, that decision really allowed me to build another source of income in a structured and guided way. So if you have been watching, if you've been following my business page, if you have been wondering, you have been learning, right? And you have been thinking, right? But you feel ready to explore the next step seriously, right? Just comment the word start or just send me a message. And again, as your mentor, I will walk you through the steps clearly and based on the process that we have here in the business. Why? Why are we doing that? Yung step-by-step process. Because we want you, right, as future business owners to also decide with confidence and not with pressure, right? So, of course, at some point, yung growth natin really begins when you start deciding and not when you keep on learning and learning and learning. So that's it for tonight. I hope I was able to, inspire you to move, right? If you are still in that stage, now you keep on asking yourself, is it worth checking out or not? You're afraid or not, but deep inside, you really want to change your life, right? Maybe now's the time to move outside of your comfort zone and do something new, right? Because maybe that's the one small step that you need in order for you to see, right? Baka ito na yung opportunity that you have been looking for, right? And whenever you're ready, right? I'm not pressuring you. Whenever you are ready, just feel free to send me a message and I'll guide you from there. All right. So that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for staying here with me up to this point on a Tuesday evening. Maraming salamat and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye for now and good night, everybody.